Meet Ryan Gresh.
When I was 9 years old, I was working in the family pharmacy, and that's where it all started. My grandpa was a pharmacist. That is the family business, helping people be healthy.
He's on a mission to change how healthcare and pain relief is administered.
Most of the pharmaceuticals are amazing, but when it came to chronic care, they rarely did anything to address the root cause.
Join us as we explore how his business is making an impact.
But we have this motto, and it's fight pain with wellness. So we believe we have the best topicals on the market.
How he's navigating his brand through this unique online space.
Email, our website, education is key to what we do. And that means that our products are not the first thing that we're offering to people, it's our education.
And how he's built Feel Good Labs into a 7-figure revenue generator.
Because money is no object. These are people flying in from all over the country, spending $30,000 for 2 days to do everything they can to be optimal.
Hey guys, if you're enjoying the videos, why not consider subscribing? We drop bi-weekly content that will help you improve your business right here on the channel. Hey Ryan, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me.
Absolutely, Jordan. Good to see you again.
Can we kick off by just kind of walking through at a super high level your story? Because I know it's an interesting one from when we spoke previously. So you kind of initially worked in the aerospace industry, right? And that's quite a change from where you are today.
Well, when I was 9 years old, I was working in the family pharmacy, and that's where it all started. My grandpa was a pharmacist. 5 of my aunts and uncles, including my dad. My younger brother, Mike, is a pharmacist. That is the family business, helping people be healthy. And when my grandpa started our family pharmacy, that's what he did. But what I saw growing up at 9, 10, 11 years old, when I went to work with my dad at our pharmacy in a local community, was we were no longer helping people. Opioid epidemic and a lot of the chronic conditions we saw through the 90s and 2000s. And my dad didn't even have enough time to hire another pharmacist because of CVS and Walgreens popping up on every corner. So it was just like hell. And I ran as far away as I could from the family business, right? I went into aerospace engineering, spent about a decade working on helicopters and jet engines, but it all changed when my dad was able to sell his pharmacy and open up the nation's first combined functional medicine practice with compounding pharmacy. And each of those were really unique in their own right, but the combination was what was so special. Compounding is like, think about 100 years ago, what a pharmacist did, right? They didn't just dispense pills, they made medicine. So he has a full lab where he makes individualized medicine where you can determine the ingredients you need, right? The dose, the delivery method, all these specific things for an individual person. But functional medicine was even bigger, and it was identifying the root cause of what was going on. A lot of what my dad saw firsthand and my grandpa was most of the pharmaceuticals are amazing for acute care, but when it came to chronic care, they rarely did anything to address the root cause, right? And oftentimes those root causes are what we eat, our lifestyle, things like that. And so I saw him start this new journey of really helping people. It was amazing. And I wanted to join. And so I created the Feel Good Lab as a vehicle and a brand to get his work and my brother, who works with him now too, out to the rest of the world, out of our small little town in Connecticut. And I joined about 7 years ago, and the rest is history.
Okay. Can I just dive into that story about your dad? What kind of prompted his change?
I think it was two things. He grew up wanting to help people. And you also take an oath as a pharmacist to do no harm. He saw firsthand people coming in the community, filling prescriptions that they were getting worse and worse and worse. And he couldn't sleep. He couldn't live with himself. The other side was with the CVS and Walgreens on every corner, the margins, he bought his pharmacy in 1987 and he had a business plan and took out a loan and all this stuff. Well, very quickly, the margins went from, like, I'm making up the numbers, but 35% on certain drugs to like 25%. The business plan was no longer viable. And so you couldn't even afford to hire another pharmacist. So now he's working open to close 7 days a week. I pretty much only saw him when I went to work. We'd be there till 2 a.m. finishing up the books and whatnot. So it just was, he was burnt out. He wasn't helping people, and he wasn't doing the thing that he's really on this earth to do, which is actually help people.
Okay. And then for you as well, I'm assuming when you were kind of, in college and kind of working, were you on this path of kind of like, health focus and stuff like that? Or was that,
No,
again, a journey?
not at all. My journey is I went on this path partially because I had to. Um, I think for me, it was really a lot around my gut. I have a very sensitive stomach. I've never been diagnosed with Crohn's or whatnot, but because of my father, I've been able to run all sorts of diagnostic testing. And right before I joined the family business, we went down this deep dive to heal my gut, which just made a massive impact on the rest of my life, my cognitive ability, my energy, how I felt. I didn't realize how sick I was because I felt that way every day for most of my life, right? So that was kind of probably that was what kickstarted me. But the other thing was, our flagship product at the Feel Good Lab. We'll talk a little bit about what we do now. Now we're a much broader wellness company, but we started really in pain relief. It's one of the areas that my dad has an expertise in, because if we can deliver medicine through the skin right to the site in pain and help reduce inflammation, improve blood flow, the root causes of a lot of chronic pain, versus taking pills, the side effects that come with taking pain medicine orally every day for many years, up to a decade for some people, are catastrophic. So for me, what made me really come back home and join the family business was we had an anecdotal phone call to the pharmacy where a patient called back in tears because this plant-based topical product my dad had developed in the pharmacy was the first thing that ever worked. It was just a one of one. And I heard the story and I said, Dad, you had that kind of impact on someone's life with something that could be sold over the counter, all plant-based natural ingredients. Remember, this is like 10 years ago. So this is before it was cool to be natural and plant-based, right? And it's natural and plant-based, not because it's better for you and safer. Those things are great, and most natural ingredients are. It's natural and plant-based because nature has given us one of the most amazing pharmacies in the world, right? A lot of pharmaceuticals are actually derived from nature, and they're synergistic compounds in these natural components that work together. And so that was kind of the story of how I left that world and came back to join the family business.
For sure. You've touched on it briefly. Can we just talk about your views and just kind of how you see the healthcare industry as a whole, and where it currently is?
Well, I think of it more as sick care today. And it's not because there's bad people. I mean, maybe there are, I don't know. But it's more of like, I think that we were naive for the last 50 years to think that the model was going to cure us and save us. Almost all of these companies are publicly traded where they have a fiduciary responsibility to make money. So you make the most money in these models by having sick people. You don't make the most money by curing disease. And so it doesn't mean that people are going to hide cures. Again, I don't know. Hopefully that's not the case. But what it does mean is that they're not going to spend billions of dollars developing them. If the return on investment isn't there, they'll get fired, right? They have a fiduciary responsibility to shareholders for the most part. So I don't blame them. I blame us because we've gotten rid of the responsibility. And the responsibility to be healthy is the little things you do every day. It's not a pill that you take once, right? It's not a shot. It's not going to the gym once. It's every single day, all of the things that you do that stack up over decades. Most chronic disease is decades in the making of low-level chronic inflammation, gut dysbiosis, things like that, genetic vulnerabilities, nutritional deficiencies, that if you don't solve them, after 10, 20, 30 years, they turn into chronic disease, right? So that's kind of how I look at it, but there is a massive tailwind and I'm super optimistic about the direction that we're going in.
Okay, I want to touch on that in a second, but just to confirm, essentially what you're saying is, one, it's really the fault of the individual, or not the fault of, but it's their responsibility to kind of look into this stuff. And then two, the industry is just behaving how the industry should, given incentive structures and prevention.
Yeah, there's no money in that. I don't know if this is true, and I'm
Mhm.
not even going to say the name because I don't know, but one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world, I heard that they've never cured a disease. And it would make sense to me if that was true, right? Like the incentive is not there. If you cure a disease, you give a treatment one time, you never see that person again, right? Versus, a pill that treats a symptom, not a root
Yeah,
cause, you take for the rest of your life. That is unbelievable business.
yeah.
So if their incentive is return on investment for shareholders, that's where the money in development is going to go.
Okay. Is there any way you think the industry can kind of change to put patients over profit?
Yes, I don't necessarily know how, but we're seeing it. There's always the bell curve. So what we're seeing is like the bell curve. We're starting to get into like there's always been the fringe people that understood these things and really spent a lot on their health and wellness. It's moving more mainstream because we have two sides of our business that we'll get into. One is like topical pain relief, which is a different category of customer that is not necessarily as proactive. They do enjoy the benefits of plant-based, but they're really about cure my pain, give me something that helps. we also have testing and gut testing and food inflammation testing, and we're dealing with the consumer that's super proactive. So we're seeing both sides. We're seeing, the people that are going to lag behind, and it's going to be hard to convert them. I talk to them on the phone every day, and when I tell them about, how potentially changing their diet could help with their inflammation and pain, most of them don't want to hear it. So, and that's the majority of the population in the United States. But the fringes are starting to kind of get more mainstream. And so we're going to see over the next decade like a massive shift as more and more people start to be proactive.
Why do you think that is? Why is it suddenly becoming, or 5, 10 years in the making? Why is it becoming more mainstream?
Well, here's a quote I say every day. It's from Confucius, and you could substitute man with woman, of course, but this is what he said. A rich man wants 10,000 things, but a sick man wants one. So what happened? We've all been there, right? I just was sick a couple weeks ago, and like all I can think about is getting better. That's it. That's the only thing. Think about society today, and really I'm focusing just on the US, but I'm sure the rest of the world is dealing similarly. Our chronic disease epidemic is out of control, right? Obesity, all these different things, and they're getting to a point of no return. So more and more people are sick, seeing people around them get sick, and realizing like if you ask almost every trillionaire, billionaire, millionaire on the planet if they would give all their money up for one more day on their deathbed, right? Most would say yes. Most, right? So what's the cost of that? What's the price of your health? It's arguably more important than anything, right? So I think that's why we're seeing it get worse, which is causing the pendulum to swing into the other direction.
Okay. And in terms of available information, do you see a lot of kind of good stuff on the internet that's kind of out there? And if so, who do you look to, or where do you look for that info?
Yeah, I don't have like one person. I also think it's important to have like conflicting views. I like to watch both sides. There's also a lot of bad info out there too, but for the most part, there's people like Andrew Huberman. There's a sleep doctor. He was on Joe Rogan. He really changed the game for me a couple years ago when I first
Is
heard
that
him.
the UK guy, Matt? I forget his
Matt
name.
White? No, I can't think of his name. But if you look up sleep doctor Joe Rogan, Matt, you're gonna find him. He was unbelievable. And actually, full disclosure, I used to have a problem with marijuana.
Hmm.
And when I heard his podcast, it was one of the main reasons I quit cold turkey.
Really? Okay.
Because it's kind of taught to us, oh, it's fine. Listen, marijuana could be beneficial as a treatment for certain things, but like anything, too much is not good. And it is a medicine, in my opinion. And so I was not using it appropriately. But the effects it has on your sleep, holy cow! Like I use an Oura ring to track, and a lot of people say, oh, I sleep great when I smoke. He really opened my eyes to looking at the data, and that's not the case. You sleep, you're maybe sound asleep and you're not waking up, but if you look at the levels of deep sleep you need to get for recovery and restoration and what your body needs, heart rate variability, all those different things, you don't get there. And it's a massive problem, and it was for me. So people like that, I like to, Twitter and X, like there's some good people that educate. There's great podcasts. But the cool thing for me is I have my dad and brother. And like, to be honest with you, and this is almost out of fault, but they've spent their whole lives on this, and I trust them so much, and I know where their heart is. They don't have, other people. I don't necessarily know who's paying them and who, whatnot. I know with them, and I go to them with everything. And they're kind of my ultimate resource. If I see a cool podcast, I send it to them. I get their debrief. Sometimes it triggers them to go into the literature and start looking at the latest and greatest science to really dig into like the mechanism of action, stuff that's way over my head, right? So I want to be clear, like I am not a doctor. I'm not a pharmacist. I'm a passionate wellness connoisseur who grew up in this field, but has access to these resources that are absolutely incredible. And they are the core of our brand. I'm the one getting it out there. Everything we do is based on the work they do in our functional medicine practice.
Nice. Okay. In terms of kind of the research or what you've seen, what would you say is the kind of 80/20 in terms of what people can do to fix some of the health problems?
Well, this is how I think about it. And this is how I pay attention and make sure I'm doing the right thing. I think nutrition, hydration, and sleep are like core three. But the hierarchy for me, I just look at like how long could we go without something to stay alive? We can go like, almost a month without food. We can go maybe a week without water and less without sleep. So the hierarchy for me is sleep, hydration, nutrition. They're all very important. But if I don't sleep, it doesn't matter how much water I drink and how many vitamins I take and how good of meals I have, right? Sleep is number one. But then hydration, like most people don't realize that if you drink tap water, it's stripped of all the minerals. If you don't have electrolytes and minerals in your water, the water doesn't get into the cells, which is what hydrates you. So it can actually dehydrate you. If you drink a ton of water all day that doesn't have the electrolytes and minerals, and you can get electrolytes from other things, just water, but if you don't have the electrolytes in your body, then none of that water is going to get into the cells, which is actually what hydrates you. So making sure I'm hydrated, making sure I sleep well, and I fast all day, so it's another reason why it's less important to me. I could go a very long time without eating, and it's no problem. And that's something that you kind of train into yourself. And I have more energy. I feel better from it, but it's partially because I had such a sensitive stomach. I found that my stomach is great now, but I still feel better when I don't eat. So it's just something for me. The last thing I'll add is something that we've been doing a lot of research here at the Feel Good Lab over the last 6 months. And it would be like the one thing I would say that is so simple that's changed my life, and we're seeing change the lives of so many people, is prebiotics. And those are the things that our gut bacteria, the probiotics, actually consume and ferment to produce postbiotics, which are called short chain fatty acids. It's what our body actually uses. Well, these prebiotics, it's soluble fiber. It's like everyone's heard, oh, eat more fiber. And we eat some soluble fiber in a conventional diet. 95% of men and 91% of women in the United States do not get enough soluble fiber. So if you don't eat enough fiber, then your bacteria are not going to be able to get enough fuel to ferment the things our body needs. And it is so easy and simple. And it's one of the reasons we developed this amazing gut microbiome test with a scientist here at UConn, the University of Connecticut, that's really changing the game because it looks at those short chain fatty acids, the postbiotics, and then determines the specific type of soluble fiber you need to optimize how your body and your gut microbiome is producing those, which makes a huge impact on energy production, inflammation, our gut barrier, right? Commonly known as leaky gut. So just taking, for me, because I don't eat a lot, I can't get it through my diet. I take a simple fiber supplement. It costs like $10 for a 90 count of this thing. It's so cheap. It's made a huge impact on how I feel.
Okay. I want to kind of come on to kind of specifics about your diet and stuff in a second, but would you say that a lot of kind of health problems today, whether it's, people with kind of ADD or, like you said about the kind of gut or the inflammation, is that kind of the body responding to poor lifestyle and kind of crying for help?
Yeah, I think so. And to me, there's two root causes, but I really narrows down to one root cause. This is my theory. It's not backed by science, although I'm sure there is science about it. To me, it's our gut bacteria, our gut microbiome. And we've really, between the food we eat, the antibiotics, not that just that we take a lot of them, but it's also in our food supply, the toxins we're exposed to, the different things that basically our body is dealing with every day, it's depleted our gut microbiome. And then you throw on top that we're not eating enough fiber for them to produce the things we need. And it's such a core piece of overall health and optimization that, again, most people, especially in the United States, do not have an optimal gut microbiome. Um, I work with a friend of mine who used to deal with Tom Brady a bit, and he ran our tests, and he said, years ago, Tom and his trainer said to me, if we could bottle up his microbiome, and I won't say the word he used for it, but in a pill, and it was like the grossest thing you can think of, but it was a joke, the world would be so much healthier because he did so many things. One of the things he really, I think, says is a huge reason that he was so successful was he took care of his gut. Like he used that as the core of all the things that he did. And he had an absolutely like amazing gut microbiome that allowed him to perform at such an optimal level because it's so core to different things. People don't realize that the gut bacteria produce a butyric acid, which is an energy producer in the body. Elite athletes have been shown to have this off the charts. Part of it is because when you exercise, you produce more butyric acid. So again, like meditation has been shown to increase butyric acid and short chain fatty acid production. Exercise has been shown to do that. So part of the reason in my belief that meditation and exercise is so good because it impacts our gut, right? Which then has a huge gut brain connection. And we're also doing research right now with our test with autism and seeing that connection between gut microbiome, short chain fatty acid, and autism, which is growing at an unbelievable rate. Again, I believe one of the root causes could be our gut bacteria and what we've done to it.
Okay. And a lot of people say kind of the gut is the second brain, right?
Yeah, I
Do
mean,
you
that's
believe that to be true?
most of the serotonin is produced in the gut.
Yeah,
right? I mean, and then on the flip side, so a lot of good things are produced in the gut. Our immune system, 80% of our immune system is right on the other side of the gut lining. And again, if you have leaky gut, then the immune system all day long is dealing with undigested food particles and toxins getting through the gut that shouldn't be and dealing with it. So all of a sudden you get sick or something else happens, and the immune system's like, I'm over here dealing with the food you just ate. And it could be healthy food, but it shouldn't be there. The gut should be doing its job. And when things are getting through the gut barrier and the immune system is now having to deal with it, autoimmune conditions, right? Things like that. I just believe everything starts with a healthy gut. And then you can go from there. It's really the core of where the business for us is moving. You start with chronic pain. You think, how does gut health have anything to do with it? Because if we don't fix the gut, which is such a root cause to out of control inflammation and immune dysregulation, then we're not going to be able to fix these downstream things that we're dealing with.
for sure. Can we talk diet now? So you mentioned you fast quite a lot. Can you just talk through the process and how you think about that, and then thoughts on food and
The
what you eat?
first thing I say is like, and again, I'm not an expert in this, a nutritionist, but this is what works for me. But everyone is unique. Everyone. So keto works for a lot of people. Paleo works. Vegan works, right? So these contradictory types of diets can work for a lot of people. Another example is particularly men versus women. We can have different needs. Sometimes, for my dad, the work that he does, many women he works with, actually, he puts on 6 meals a day, smaller portions, right? Versus sometimes, and some women can fast all day too, and some men can eat 6 meals a day. The point is trying to figure out what's right for you. And it's also a reason that we run a lot of these tests to really get a personalized understanding of what you need. But what works for me is pretty much fasting from, I eat no breakfast, no lunch. Maybe once every now and then I'll go to a meeting at lunch and I'll eat lunch, but I don't want to eat. You kind of have to pay me. It's got to be a pretty good meeting to get me to eat lunch because I feel lethargic afterwards. My stomach no longer has its sort of issues that I have. However, if I eat pizza 3 days in a row, they'll certainly come back. And so it's for me, it's the big thing is making sure I'm getting enough nutrients. So I know my deficiencies, I know my genetic vulnerabilities and why I have some of those deficiencies. As an example, like I'm deficient in vitamin A, but if I ate all the vitamin A supplement in the world of the normal form that it comes in over the counter, I wouldn't get any better because I have a genetic deficiency to convert that to the usable form. So I take a special form of vitamin A to make sure, and I do my nutrient level testing to make sure I'm getting the right nutrients. And then I try to eat a good balanced dinner. My cheat is that I snack in the evening and then I go to bed and don't eat again until maybe some cashews before dinner.
Okay. Couple of questions on that. One, can we just talk about food groups and typically what your diet looks like, and then also in terms of kind of what are you basing this on? Is it how you feel and testing, or what's the process for determining what's kind of right for you?
It's way more how I feel, but then it's backed up by testing. Because there's also things that I also learned very quick when I didn't know how sick I was because I was so sick every day that I don't necessarily know if I'm optimal and I'm kind of on the journey. I think you'd agree with this as an entrepreneur. We work with a lot of professional athletes and I try to learn from them and how diligent they are with everything they do to produce the most energy, get the best recovery so you can perform the best. And even if I wasn't an entrepreneur, as a dad, as just a person, I want that. So I'm always trying to optimize. And I think the testing is important to that. But I also judge it on how I feel. And you asked about food groups. I'm really fortunate because my wife cooks very healthy food. I don't have to think about it. Really healthy ingredients, and there's always a balance of veggies and chicken and meat and protein and whatnot. So I don't even spend any time thinking about that. And then the second benefit is my mom. She was a nutritionist. So I had my dad, who was the pharmacist, functional medicine practitioner. My mom was a nutritionist. But beyond that, she's an amazing cook, like amazing. And she makes the best gluten-free, dairy-free things like lasagna. How is lasagna gluten-free, dairy-free? It's the best lasagna I've ever had in my life. So I'm very blessed that my family all takes this very serious. We don't typically go out to a restaurant that doesn't have particularly healthy food. Yeah, every now and then you cheat, of course. You go on vacation and whatnot. But it's like the 80-20 rule. We try to make sure that most of what we do is fueling our body. And I think back to like why we got into this. Most food has been kind of modified to be like as addicting as possible and so tasty. And it's tricked us away from like we consume food. We all do it. I love going to dinner. I love it with friends to a really delicious restaurant. but that's not the reason we should eat. We should eat to fuel our body optimally. And that's where the unique individual comes in of figuring out what they need and some of the reasons that we run the tests that we do.
Okay. Can we move on to that then? So, what kind of testing do you guys do? And yeah,
Yeah.
how do things move from there once people have kind of gone through that process?
So the first test we launched, and again, everything is based on the work that my dad and brother do. So oftentimes these tests will be ran at our pharmacy functional medicine practice for a decade before we bring them on. And the first one was that case. It's a food inflammation test. So it's a finger prick at home. You drop a couple drops of blood on a card. The lab will then measure your immune response. So it takes your blood, reacts it with different food proteins, and see if not just you have an immune response. That's often called a food sensitivity. So there's an immunoglobulin, IgG, that if it triggers, that's a food sensitivity. And that's important info to know. But the problem with that is it might give you 50 foods back. There could be a lot of false positives because it's one signal we're measuring. Our test is unique. It measures a second signal, which is an immune response plus a complement protein, which is the body's way of triggering inflammation. And inflammation, out of control chronic inflammation, is the enemy. Now, acute inflammation keeps us alive. Every day, our inflammatory response is keeping us alive. But when that's chronic low level inflammation that shouldn't be there, those are the types of things that over a decade turn into chronic disease. In fact, almost every chronic disease has an inflammatory component to it. So that test will give you and identify what foods in your diet are triggering inflammation. You do an 8-week elimination, you remove those foods, and then if you choose, you can reintroduce them. So like me, I'm the type of person where I'm like, man, I had dairy, gluten, and eggs off the charts, like off the charts, the highest level of inflammation. I cut them out. I felt incredible. But of course, pizza is my favorite food. After 8 weeks, what's the first thing I do is I eat pizza. And I did not feel good for quite a while. And it was my body telling me like, hey, this doesn't work for you. But we have elite athletes we work with that if we tell them don't eat eggs, they never eat egg again for the rest of their life because they're wired differently than somebody like me.
Just to be clear then, so it's literally as simple as, taking this test and it's spitting out the results of, like, avoid XYZ because you're having
Sure.
this kind of problem.
And it's about 95% accurate. There's amazing quality controls, but it's not like as simple as here's your playbook to being the healthiest version of you. It is a step in the right direction and it is unbelievably helpful, but it's not like, we have some instances of people that have found trigger foods on there that's really absolutely changed their life from different things they're dealing with: chronic pain, GI distress, mental clarity, fog, etc., just feeling good. We have other people we work with that identify foods that don't feel a huge difference. For them, it's up to them to determine because these inflammatory triggers may or may not turn into symptoms. So some people see the symptoms as GI distress, bloating. Bloating is a huge one, chronic pain, autoimmune conditions. And they'll see those symptoms start to get better with the food they eat. Other people won't feel a ton. And then it becomes up to them of how diligent they want to be. So you take the elite athlete side and they don't care. They know mentally that it's in their benefit to reduce these foods that are triggering an immune response. But some people are like, you know what, I'm going to go back to eating it. It didn't make as much of an impact on a symptom standpoint. And that's in the minority for us. And that's up to you. It gives you the data to make changes. You take an 8-week elimination, and then you decide how you want to go forward. For the most part, people feel a difference, especially when they have one of the main trigger foods show up, which is dairy, gluten, and eggs. I had all three, but almost everybody we test has at least one of those. Not everybody, but almost. Some people have two, some people have three, some people have all types of wheat, not just the gluten. And the reason is, in my opinion, it's not the gluten that's the problem. It's not the eggs. It's not the dairy. It's the way we process them. It's the genetically modified grain that we use for gluten nowadays in the United States that's resistant to glyphosate. It's the antibiotics in a lot of the dairy products. It's how we harvest the eggs. Those are the bigger problems, and they are triggering inflammation because they're not necessarily as healthy as they used to. A lot of people go to Europe, have no problem eating pasta and gluten all day, and not see the same negative repercussions that they do when they eat those things in the United States.
Just on that, how can you kind of best ensure a clean food supply?
Best ensure, do it yourself. And then there's, steps from that, pasture raised all the way up, right? Organic. I used to think organic was BS. Doesn't mean people can't lie, but we really don't eat anything that's not organic at our house. And it's huge as you start diving into those things. But then we have a family friend who has an amazing farm right in town, and we literally see the eggs. They grow the chickens. I had to go over there and actually do this to the chickens, which was awful. And people are probably like, oh my God, why would you do that? But it's like, how often do you eat meat and you're so disconnected from what we have to do? So I didn't enjoy that process at all, but it was like a responsibility. It's like, if I'm going to eat this thing a couple times a week, I should probably be responsible enough to be able to do the deed. Right. And then, by the way, you eat it that night and it's like the freshest, it almost doesn't taste like chicken because it's not necessarily filled with these sort of things and need to get it through the supply chain of the food system. It's directly farm to table. That's the best. In a perfect world, we'd have a farm at my house. We'd have everything we need self-sufficient. But that's not really possible for most people, especially in the cities. So I think starts with organic, pasture raised when you can, and just being diligent and finding brands that you trust.
Okay. Slightly off topic, but I want to talk about kind of other environmental factors. You talked there about kind of cities. I often feel kind of disconnected. I don't mean kind of spiritually, I just mean kind of physically disconnected from nature in some kind of urban environments. What do you think to that? And yeah, does kind of your kind of non-food environment also impact a lot of these kind of things as well?
Definitely. One of my favorite things to do, I don't know the science behind it, is walk barefoot and touch the earth. Get outside, sun, right? Like the sunlight first thing in the morning, breathing good, fresh, good quality air, right? You talk about a city, it's probably not the best quality air. And then walking on the surface of the earth. In the summertime, I pretty much never have shoes on when I'm outside if I can. And some people are like, oh, that's gross. I'm like, I don't know. Is it? I, I think wearing sweaty shoes all day that create a barrier between you and the earth. And one thing recently, my dad actually gifted me for Christmas grounding bed sheets that do a similar process of just reconnecting you with the earth. So again, I don't know the science behind it, but I believe in it, and it makes sense to me that thousands of years ago we were very connected with the earth. We were outside all the time, and we've become more and more disconnected. And I do believe that plays a role as one of the other root causes. We talked about gut microbiome. I do believe that, you know, being out of touch with nature and then the toxic burden we're exposed to and the quality of our air and things like that, also another piece of the root cause. But then the mental side of it, right? Of like always being stressed with our phone and being in the city and there's a lot of stress going on versus like being at the beach with nobody around at sunset. Those are like completely different environments. I think they play a role as well.
Would you have kind of a solution for people in that situation that maybe, can't just move somewhere? What would you say to
Well,
them in kind of your city?
I can't tell you like the grounding sheets have changed my life, but I certainly feel good about having them. You plug them into the ground in your outlet. They just go on my bed and it allows me to just be connected again, grounded to the earth. That's really what they do. So I think that's something very easy to try. I'm not sure on the science because I believe in the theory of it so much that I don't need to be. Um, the other thing is just really understanding that, okay, you live in this environment, so maybe a couple times a year you do get out of it and you go to the beach and the ocean. I mean, seawater is so amazing for us and being on the beach, or go to the mountains and just get outside and just making sure that you do those sort of things. Um, that would be my advice, but everyone is different. I think some people are suited for that environment better than others. I think an example for that is, like mold. Mold is a serious problem, but not for everybody. You could have 10 people living in a house. This is often the case. One person will be so sick, and eventually they'll figure out that it's mold, which is really hard to figure out. And they might have a genetic deficiency where they're not able to detoxify. So it's like the point is mold isn't good for anybody, but for some people it's way worse than others. And those are the people that get the severe mold sickness oftentimes, right? So it's a different example, but the point is, living in the type of lifestyle we live, we're bombarded with these types of toxins, and you got to figure out what's right for you to be able to be the healthiest version of yourself.
For sure. The final question on this kind of angle is the use of technology. So you kind of touched on it there of like, not always positive. How do you kind of personally try and get the best use of technology whilst not letting it kind of run or ruin your life?
Not good, not good at all. I'm bad at it. Um, Something recently I did is I turned off my email alerts. So I have to look at email when I want to versus having them pop up all day long into my face and making me be more reactive than proactive. I try to do into do not disturb mode as much as I can on my phone, but I'm not great at it. Um, it's probably my biggest problem and vice, one of the, um, and it's something I need to get better at because it's a problem, no doubt. I like to think one thing I do, and it's kind of fun. Say I'm like in a waiting room for a doctor's appointment or something, and I got 10 minutes to kill. It's so easy to go on your phone. Everybody does. I try to like test myself and leave my phone. And maybe there's someone there I'll talk to or I'll meet, or maybe I'll just be bored. But like being bored with yourself, I think it was Naval that said it. He's one of my favorite podcast guests. If you've ever seen anything with him, he's unbelievable. He'll drop like 100 quotes that just blow your mind. I think it was him that said something about, like the goal is to like be comfortable with yourself without anything. And so I just try to sit there sometimes, even though like that's the ultimate environment to have a phone in your hands. So you have nothing better to do, just sitting there. But like sometimes those are times where, or like at the airport, I'll put my phone away and just kind of sit there when it's so easy to just go dive into this other world and distract yourself from what's actually going on around us. So,
Okay. No, I agree. I'm very bad at it too. I just wondered
yeah.
if you had any hacks, but yeah, sounds like we have the same problem.
Yeah, I
But
think a lot of people do. We are not alone.
no,
I think way more people are taking steps to improve their health through nutrition and diet and gut health and stuff than they are through this.
yeah,
This is a pretty bad addiction we have in society.
for sure. Can we go back to kind of the testing then? So you mentioned the food inflammation piece. Is there kind of other tests that you recommend or that you guys focus on?
Yeah. So in the food inflammation test, we have kind of three levels. One of them looks at 22 foods. Those are the 22 core foods, right? The gluten, the dairy, the eggs. And it's great for people. It's the cheapest option. It's something just, if you want to test for those main ones, it's great. But most people end up doing the more broad tests that look at 132 foods and 176 foods. And I bring that up because in those two tests, we also look at leaky gut or gut barrier dysfunction. So we have 8 markers that we measure in your blood. And these are things that shouldn't be in your blood, right? They should be present in your gut. But if they're getting through the gut barrier into the blood, then we know that likely there's an issue with gut barrier. And that's oftentimes just as important as identifying those inflammatory foods. Because if you do have a leaky gut, we talked about it already with the immune system and all those things, we want to heal that as soon as possible. And there's things you can do. One is reduce inflammatory foods. Another is, there's certain supplements that can be helpful, like L-glutamine, and probiotics can help, but we're finding that prebiotics are way more important. So taking a combination prebiotic, probiotic can be very beneficial. But it's like, if you do have leaky gut, we want to identify that. So that's a really important tool we have within that same blood panel. It's the same test you take. It's just we run that blood panel on that broader test. And then recently we got into the gut microbiome testing space with what I had mentioned to you with the prebiotic fiber recommendations and looking at the short chain fatty acids produced in the gut. What's so cool here, I've ran like a lot of these stool tests, and without getting into TMI, here's one of the problems with them. The two problems are, the most important problem is, if you ask my dad, he's ran every one of these tests you can on the market. They're expensive, they're inconvenient. You got to scoop things into the fridge and like fill up full vials and, all those sorts of things. But the more important thing is they don't give you actionable data. So a lot of them will say like eat more fiber or eat less sugar or eat, but it's more generic because it's looking at all the bacteria oftentimes in your gut. These 10,000 strains, we have 10 trillion microorganisms in our gut. But if you took 100 people and you looked at their gut bacteria, they're going to have different ratios. They're different, but they could all be healthy. The difference is, and what's important is, are those bacteria producing short chain fatty acids? That's more important. You want to be producing enough short chain fatty acids in the right ratio. So we focus on just that side. We don't necessarily focus on what all the different bacteria you have in your gut is. Is the gut bacteria producing the thing we need? Because if it's not, it's more likely that it's not getting enough fuel and fiber, soluble fiber to ferment than it is that you don't have the bacteria. Because even if you do have the bacteria, it's not going to produce and ferment, and then it's not going to survive and replicate itself. So the test is really cool. It just looks at those short chain fatty acids and recommends specific types of soluble fiber to get it up. And my results personally were pretty remarkable. After starting the fiber supplements, I felt better. No doubt. My gut was really, again, without TMI, uh, much more comfortable. And in terms of like bathroom experience and all that stuff, unbelievable. I was like blown away just in a couple weeks. But bigger was my energy. A lot of these short chain fatty acids are so important to different things in the body, including up to 20% of our energy is from butyric acid. Again, that's the one I talked about with elite athletes. So I did my retest, And butyric acid, the one that we talked about that's good for energy, I was severely low. I tripled my production in just 3 months of taking a fiber supplement. That was really the only change I made. So I saw drastic changes in how I felt. But then when I did the retest, my ratios were all aligned, and my production of short chain fatty acids was optimal from depleted beforehand. So that was really cool to see firsthand. And so we just launched this test on the website over the weekend. We've been doing it friends and family in partnership with this lab for the last 6 months. Done a couple hundred patients. We also have some clinical studies in the works with autism. That's been amazing. And it just went live on the website this weekend. In fact, it's still password protected today, but by tomorrow it'll be off as I finish up the site. And we're very excited because this test is amazing. The food test is amazing. But combined, we believe 1+1 is going to be synergistic and be more than two. By identifying the inflammatory foods, by identifying if we have gut barrier dysfunction, and then identifying if our microbiome is producing the things we actually need, we can figure out exactly how to move forward. And if we can make those changes at once, they're all going to play into each other. It's not just one thing. People say, like, what's the one thing? It's not one thing. We need to reduce inflammation. We need to heal the gut, and we need to make sure we're fueling our microbiome to produce the short chain fatty acids. Those are the three important things we see in gut health. And then it gets back to our core at the Feel Good Lab, where we're working oftentimes in chronic pain. And you'd say, like, how does my gut microbiome have anything to do with chronic pain? You would be blown away. It has such an impact on everything, but especially inflammatory conditions like that.
Okay. You mentioned retesting there. How much of what you do is kind of a one-time test versus kind of something that should be monitored over time? And what's kind of the time period for the testing?
Yeah, the food inflammation test doesn't need to be retested. We have some people that love to retest because they're really dialed and they like to see changes over time. For the most part, I've retested 4 times. Obviously, I can. And that's over 7 years I've done those tests. For the most part, the same foods show up even if I don't eat them anymore. So there's kind of like a genetic component to that. But they may change in the hierarchy of how inflammatory they are. So when I'm eating them all the time, they may show up as more inflammatory for me. When I'm not eating them, they might drop down. They still might show up as inflammatory. In fact, for me, they did, but they weren't as high. They weren't in the reds off the charts like they were when I ate them every time. Um, for the most part, the food inflammation test, I would say, is not necessary to retest. The leaky gut portion, which we can pull out and just do that test on its own, can be, if you have severe leaky gut, and we're going to go in a protocol to kind of fix that, and we want to see where we land, that can be really helpful. But other people will judge the progress on how they feel. And something like leaky gut, you can tell pretty significantly. You're going to feel less bloating, less GI issues. Your bathroom routine is going to be more consistent. You're also going to potentially see improvements in cognition by having the gut barrier kind of healed up a bit. So some people will retest and others won't. But the one that's really important to retest is this gut barrier. I'm sorry, the gut microbiome. Because for me, as an example, after my retest and all my ratios moved into the realm I want them to be, now I'm going on a sustainment soluble fiber routine. So the first routine I went on for 3 months was to move things in a direction. So I was taking certain soluble fibers that were going to reduce my acetic acid, increase my propanoic acid, increase my butyric acid, and it massively did that. If you saw my before and after, it was like, whoa, it did exactly what it was supposed to do. But if I keep doing that, now it's going to get out of range in the opposite direction, right? So now I've moved into a sustainment soluble fiber based on exactly where I landed after 3 months. For most people, I'd recommend 2 months for the retest, and I would have bet I would have seen significant progress after 1 month just based on how I felt.
And is that kind of retesting, is that an ongoing thing that you recommend kind of in all the future?
I would say two types of people. Some people, it would be a yearly thing. If you really want to be optimal, I'd recommend doing it yearly. But if you want the best value, I would say you do the 2 tests. You do the first test, you do the retest, and if you're not in the range, then we're going to maybe make changes to continue to move it in the direction. Maybe if we didn't move as much as we need to, we might up the dosage of fiber to get more in there. We might look at a probiotic to get the right bacteria that can ferment that fiber. So we might take another step in the direction of making sure. And then maybe you would have a third test in that instance. But once you get to the sustain level, you might want to do one other test to make sure we're sustaining, but the reality is that sustainment level should be pretty good for you unless there's a massive change. Antibiotics, a huge diet change, maybe a sickness could cause you to maybe want to make changes.
Okay. Can we now talk about kind of supplements and some of the other products that you
Yeah.
offer? What are you guys doing in that space?
Yeah, so our flagship, I would call our topical supplements, even though they are over-the-counter drugs and approved by the FDA. But our flagship we launched with are plant-based pain relievers and sport recovery products. So they're topical. They help to support inflammation, improve blood flow, also have some immediate pain relief with a tiny bit of menthol. And so those are great products for people that are dealing with chronic conditions or athletes that are training and want to recover faster. And again, reduce inflammation, improve blood flow. It's the same thing whether you're in chronic pain or you're an athlete looking to recover. It's the same, levers we want to pull. So those are the products we launched the brand with 7 years ago, and they're our flagships. But we have this motto, and it's fight pain with wellness. So we believe we have the best topicals on the market. I mean, we've sold hundreds of thousands, might even be millions of tubes at this point. I'm not even sure exactly. I should know that. But it's amazing. But the people that get the best results with our brand, they don't just use a topical for their pain. They're looking at their diet, nutrition, they're looking at their gut microbiome. That's the testing side, right? So the topical side of the testing. But right in between there is the supplements that we offer. And we have really great clinical grade supplements because not all supplements are created equal. I'll give you a good example. Most people would benefit from a vitamin D, depending on where you live. Even the color of your skin can impact how much vitamin D you're able to produce based on what you can absorb from the sun, how much sun you get. But most people are deficient in the United States. It's actually an epidemic because vitamin D is so important in many things, not just immune system, but so many things. But if you take a vitamin D supplement off the shelf and it doesn't have vitamin K, throw it away, right? If you don't have the proper levels of vitamin D and K, then the vitamin D isn't going to work. In fact, it can be detrimental. So it's little things like that. It's having the right source and quality of each vitamin, but then the knowledge to know what goes with what, because it's very rarely one thing. And so for K and D to work together, that's really, really how you're going to get the most beneficial results, improving vitamin D levels. And then for me, we test. So we don't offer this through the Feel Good Lab yet, but I do intracellular micronutrient testing. So that means not in my blood. Take a lot of supplements, you'll have a lot of supplements in your blood. You need to make sure that they're transporting into the cells. That's where they work. We talked about that with hydration. So we'll do intracellular micronutrient testing, and we'll do that based on the dosing that we're taking of different supplements. And then to take it really crazy, again, this is stuff we do at the pharmacy and functional medicine practice that will come out at the Feel Good Lab. We look at genetics. Why are you deficient, even if you're still taking these things? Why is it not transporting into the cells? And then what do we do to fix it? And genetics can oftentimes unlock that.
Okay. I've got a lot of kind of follow-up questions to that I
Yeah.
want to kind of get through, and I'll try and do one at a time. The first one is on the supplement side. Do you recommend the products that you guys have everyone should be taking, or is that kind of test, see where the deficiency is, and then take the relevant?
Well, we never recommend everyone should do anything. However, the products we do have today are things that most people would benefit from.
Okay.
And we're not offering the intracellular micronutrient testing today, so we can't go and tell people to go do it. They can do it, and we recommend in a perfect world, you would test. You wouldn't just supplement blindly. It's always better. But that's, again, we get back to that bell curve, and that's on the fringes who's going to do that. Most people say, what should I take? And for most people, a vitamin D is so beneficial. A fish oil, really good. You got to be super careful with fish oil because you get a poor quality fish oil, and guess what that poor quality fish was eating,
It's metal, right?
right? Metal and junk, and
Yeah.
so it's going to come through in the fish oil. But omega-3s are so important, especially because in a traditional American diet, we eat so many omega-6s that we need those in balance, and we eat so many that we get out of balance, and it's a huge inflammatory burden. So omega-3s can be very anti-inflammatory. In fact, there's a new product we're working on that's a special form of omega-3s that's being proven in clinical studies to be anti-inflammatory. We don't have it out yet. They're called SPMs, specialized pro-resolving mediators. For anybody out there dealing with an inflammatory condition, we've seen great success at pretty high dosages of using those to help with inflammatory conditions. So we'll be looking to bring that in the realm of some of the things we do. But, I got some more here, on my shelf. We have some that help with leaky gut. We have a probiotic in the works, the prebiotic fiber supplements we've talked about. So our supplements are not the core of what we do, but we want to provide them because we're a resource and people trust us as they start working with us. So they oftentimes have asked me, like, what do you recommend? And instead of going and developing a better vitamin D, we go and find the brands that my dad has worked with and trusted and tested with for 30 years, and we partner with them and have them make it for us. So, do we have the best margin on it? No. And are they the cheapest supplements on the market? No. But they're the best, in our opinion. And so we go and find those brands to partner with. and add it as a resource, because most people are not able to get the nutrients we need in our daily life through the food we eat. The soil's been stripped of nutrients, the water we drink, so it's very important that we understand what nutrients we need. I have a podcast myself all about wellness. I had this amazing doctor on, and he said, Ryan, I don't think we have chronic disease. I think we have nutrient deficiencies and genetic vulnerabilities. And that if we solve for those things, almost everybody, there's always anomalies, but most people would be optimal and healthy if we really looked at the nutrients that they need and we got that to them early, like as children, right? And we looked at their genetics, because there may be reasons that they don't have those nutrients in their body, and we can look at genetics to unlock that. So that really opened my eyes to understanding how important it is, for me, especially for someone that doesn't eat a lot. I need to make sure I'm getting those nutrients somewhere. It's always better to get them from your diet. People often say to me that are kind of anti-supplement, this is BS. You just pee them all out. You do pee a lot of them out, but that doesn't mean that you're not hugely impacting the nutrients in your body, right? And you pee a lot of them out because our body is not functioning optimally. Your gut, like the amount of nutrients absorbed in our gut, and if you have gut issues, well, you're right. You're not going to be converting a lot of them into the usable form and getting through the gut what should be. So it's a huge impact. And so that's why we look, it's not one thing. It's not take vitamin D. It's why we look at all these things: reduce inflammation, improve gut microbiome, and then look at what supplements you need. That's kind of like the third rung on the ladder, in our opinion, but something that's very important in why we offer those.
Okay. You've said this a few times in the kind of recent segment about, some of these levels not showing up in the blood, or being incorrect kind of blood measurements, and you test kind of at the cellular level. What does that kind of test look like?
Yeah. And so again, it's not us. We hire a company that gives us the labs. Now we are looking to bring that in house, as a bigger vision. But what it looks like is, the challenge is, for the test we love that's super accurate that we use, you have to have a phlebotomist come out. So it's not, so typically we like to do it like, we worked with an entire basketball team, like professional. So we had them come out, the phlebotomist, to do everybody, right? You could have the phlebotomist come out and just work with you, but it becomes much more expensive. So they draw quite a bit of blood, because we're measuring a lot of things. And then about 2 weeks later, you'll get the report back that shows you your nutrient levels and mineral levels in the blood and in the cell. And that's oftentimes where you can see when you have really high in the blood but not in the cell. That's when we start diving into the genetics, or looking at, this is where my dad comes in. What other things can impact the transporting of those minerals or vitamins or nutrients into the cell? And oftentimes he's pretty knowledgeable to understand, again, the vitamin K with vitamin D, and making sure that, so looking at why, and then putting people on a personalized plan to really make those changes.
Okay. Two kind of final off-piste questions, that I'll try and kind of link together. In terms of testing, where do you look at, or if you do at all, do you look at kind of testosterone levels in kind of men? And the second part to that is, in terms of kind of other diseases and illnesses, do you check for things like cancer to try and kind of catch that early, or try and look at ways to kind of prevent that?
Yeah, and I'm gonna, this is outside of the realm of what we do at the Feel Good Lab today, but in our functional medicine practice, absolutely. In fact, at our compounding pharmacy, the number one thing that we produce is transdermal bioidentical hormones, right? And bioidentical is important because this is the same form that the body produces. So we do a lot of that, and it depends on the age and the symptoms. We don't just blanket test everybody for everything. Although, if you want to be optimal, even if you're a 21-year-old guy and you feel amazing, if you want to be as optimal as you can be, you should test your testosterone levels. Um, Typically, from a cost basis, people will do it when they need to, when they're feeling symptoms, and when we have a good indication, or based on age. If we're working with somebody in their 40s as a male or as a female, we're going to test their hormone levels. Hormones are so important, absolutely so important. And then the second question is like the preventative nature of cancer screening and whatnot. We're seeing a huge boom in this like concierge medicine space, where you will go in and be preventative. You'll run a lot of the tests I just talked about, genetic, micronutrient. In fact, some of these concierge practices have come to us and are bringing our tests in for the gut microbiome and food inflammation, which is cool. It's a really great signal, because money is no object. These are people flying in from all over the country, spending $30,000 for 2 days to do everything they can to be optimal. And a big thing they do is full body MRIs, really looking at those anomalies and seeing if they can find say, cancer as a super early detection. It's not our expertise. Most people that come to work with my dad and brother at our functional medicine practice are already dealing with something, and they say, I've tried everything. I'm at my, like, I'm willing to do something. But that's been over the past 10 years, because it wasn't necessarily cool to go see a functional medicine practitioner 10 years ago when my dad was doing this, right? You were actually looked at as a little bit of a kook. Nowadays, people are realizing, like, wow, this is where medicine is moving. Nutrients, lifestyle, diet, right? The things that are impacting the root cause of what's going on. But back then it wasn't. I will say now we get more and more people coming asking the question that you are, that I'm willing to invest anything to make sure that I'm as healthy as I can be and get preventative. So we're looking at different things to help us diagnose that. And the cool thing is there is amazing innovations coming out in the space. At the University of Connecticut Health Center, where my office is, I have 3 companies here doing early detection of different cancers and different disease through your urine. In fact, 2 of them are urine, 1 is blood, where that sort of stuff is coming, where we're all going to have access. And I see a world where maybe through the Feel Good Lab, you can get an at-home kit and it can be part of your yearly checkup, right? You can do these tests, and just, if you can detect it early, the likelihood of you being able to resolve that is unbelievable.
I
So
like
it's a huge place of where I see things moving right now.
that. Okay. Back to you guys. How do you balance this kind of super strong mission with marketing and kind of getting your message out to as many people as possible?
Well, I haven't done a great job, but I'm learning. As a first-time founder, you make a lot of mistakes. And as an example, like selling our pain cream, nobody wants paid ads that's 60 years old for a pain cream. Where they do want to find us is on Good Morning America. We were on TV last month on a different channel, QVC. We tell our story, and we get people and hosts and wellness practitioners that are credible, that believe in us and believe in our products, and have had real experience. Them telling our story is our ultimate sales tool. But then on the flip side, with the testing, we're finding a younger and younger demographic that's really understanding and believing in this sort of proactive testing approach. So we're starting to open the door back again with some paid advertising and some media, because the younger demographic on the testing side really, really sees the value. And I think that we're going to be able to turn that marketing funnel on. The other piece is education, email, our website. Education is key to what we do. And we believe one day the Feel Good Lab could be like the WebMD for wellness. That would be our goal. And that means that our products are not the first thing that we're offering to people. It's our education. And we're not going to gate it and make you pay for it. We want to really be that resource to help people be the healthiest version of themselves.
Okay.
So, those are kind of from a marketing perspective, what we look at. It's retention and education, and then it's getting credibility through our partners and ways that we can get eyeballs on the brand.
Nice. On the kind of TV and QVC piece that you mentioned, how did you end up in that space?
Well, QVC was a multi-year in the making. We knew our product would do well, right? Think of the demographic for the topical pain cream. It's older. It's people that have tried everything. They're watching TV. And we got to QVC. We finally got to like a VP, and they said, Ryan, this category used to be amazing for us, but people have lost complete trust for anything in this category. Snake oil is a real thing. Nobody's going to buy this. We had to shut down the whole category. We don't sell a single topical pain reliever. And I fought for a year. We are different. We have a different story. We have a different product. You use it differently. I promise you we can make it work. We'll offer a money back guarantee and let people understand that we're really here to help them. We have a product that can work. Finally, they got sick of me, burdening them with emails all the time. They said, fine, we'll give you a chance, but if you don't succeed, you're buying back all your inventory. I'm like, okay, fine, let's go. We got on. We happened to get a host that absolutely fell in love with the product, and it authentically helped him and his family. And him and I crushed. We did amazing. Unfortunately, he left the company. He was there 33 years. He retires, and I had to find a new host. And I realized a very important lesson, that if I don't have that authentic storytelling, it doesn't work. When I get a salesperson on there with me, Ryan, this worked on my neck last night. Clearly, they're just saying it to sell product. It doesn't work. Every patient we have, they tell me the same thing. I've tried everything. Nothing's going to work. I don't think anything will ever work for my pain. How is this going to work? And the placebo effect is a powerful tool. Our product is not the placebo effect. But if we can make people have hope, the impact our amazing product can have goes tenfold when they believe that something's going to work for them. And so that's my job as a marketer. And when I go on QVC is to tell the authentic story, but to give them hope. It's one of the reasons we have a 100% money back guarantee on our topical pain products. If you try them for 30 days as directed and it doesn't work for you, we give your money back gladly. And we don't have a problem with a lot of returns.
Yeah.
So that's been a huge tool for us. That answer your question?
Yeah, for sure. I guess kind of on the back of that, have there been any other channels that have worked similarly well to reach that demographic?
TV is so big from our biggest way. Like in a minute, we can get 1 million+ eyeballs on our brand
Wow.
and tell our story. So it's just been amazing. And the thing is, everyone either has experienced chronic pain
Yeah.
before or knows somebody who has. So it's a very broad product we can market to. At the same time, everybody could benefit from improving their gut microbiome and identifying what foods in their diet are inflammatory.
Mm,
And so as the society shifts that becoming more mainstream, we look forward to being able to tell that story on TV,
okay.
right, to that more core demographic. And that's something we're very excited about. And I think the other piece is we've been around for a while. We have tens of thousands of customers that love us, know, love, and trust us. And even with the gut microbiome test that's going live tomorrow, I can't wait to email them, our core audience and educate them on the benefits of this and provide a new service that can really help them live a healthy life.
For sure. Outside of QVC, have you looked at any other kind of TV ads, maybe, or kind of different channels in that space that you can reach?
QVC has been great, and the success we had on QVC got us on Good Morning America, which we've done 3 times now. We were on The View a couple of weeks ago. We were on Inside Edition. These are just kind of mainstream television shows in the US. Some have done way better than others. I will tell you the one core thing, regardless of the amount of eyeballs watching, is when we get a host that falls in love with the product and brand, we sell out. And when we get a host that's just going through the motions, we sell a third to a quarter of as much. So that's the most important thing for us is finding hosts that love what we're doing. And it's not hard. We just need them to give it a try or give it to family members to give it a try. And not every product's going to work for everybody. But what we do is we send them a beautiful care package with 10 different products and say, here's who these work for. Give them to people in your life. Because when they get one that has that experience, and if you give 10 out, I'm very confident we're going to get more than one that says, oh my God, Auntie Jamie, this literally is the greatest thing I've ever used for my chronic arthritis. Thank you. And then she tells that story on air, and we pretty much sell out when that story happens.
So it's all about kind of getting buy-in, which then builds that trust and credibility.
Getting buy-in and authentic buy-in. We're not in the game of paying people and having them say things that they shouldn't say. I've never want that because you can tell when you've been in chronic pain, your snake oil radar is off the charts.
Hmm.
You're very, very, very skeptical of everything. But when you hear a very authentic story of somebody telling the truth, you know it.
Yeah.
And that's what's so important.
Okay. Can we talk product development and kind of testing next? So I know you've kind of talked through the product suite. How do you, and also the stuff you've got kind of coming soon, how do you think through, that development phase from idea to test to kind of
Yeah.
launch, and the roadmap kind of what's coming in the future?
As an engineer, this is my favorite thing. However, I don't need to do much of it at all because I have my dad and brother every day living this. I like to say that the functional medicine practice in pharmacy is 2 to 5 years ahead of us. We talked about some of the things they're doing, and they're doing even more things and amazing. And my dad is on the bleeding edge of some of the coolest things that can impact our health. Those are my innovators. They're working with real people with real problems. And when we start to see success, not just anecdotally, but across a population, then we start to communicate about how do we bring it under the Feel Good Lab. And then what testing are we going to need to do to really market it and sell it and bring it out to a broader population? There's safety testing that we need to do. There's marketing, there's clinical testing to prove efficacy. So that's kind of our framework. But because they do the hard work, and by the way, they've been doing the hard work for 35 years. Like this is what we do. So I have that as my backing in my innovation product pipeline that I get to rely on that really gives us a huge competitive advantage.
Okay. And I know when we spoke before, you talked about kind of, obviously this being a very tightly regulated space, and there's a lot of challenges sometimes in going from kind of small batch production to mass production. How do you kind of bridge that gap, and what's the process there?
Well, now it's different. When we first launched, so a quick little story, we had this product developed in the family pharmacy, all plant based. We had these patients getting amazing results, like I told the story of. We started to build a business around this. So my dad was, formulating these products in our lab. And sure enough, when we finally got ready to go try to get some patents and IP and go find a manufacturer, we realized that there were changes that had to be made to the formula. And this is a formula we tested for years. So we were devastated. Our manufacturer was like, this is a great product and all, but it has no preservatives. It's not going to have shelf stability. It's not going to pass these sort of microbial testing. So you need to and those products are great because we're going from lab to patient. So it's not like they're sitting on the shelf for 2 years. But we had to really change the formula to make sure it was ready for production. Thank God that once we got the formulas from the manufacturer back, they worked just as good, maybe even better. And that was just luck because now when we go to product development and we have something we're working on, we have a new product coming out that's a new form factor for our topicals for foot and leg pain. We start with the manufacturer. We bring in my dad and my brother. We formulate together with them. We understand cost. We understand efficacy. We understand mixability. We understand shelf stability. And those things all come in the forefront. And then we develop and get the prototypes made instead of in our lab. We make them at the manufacturer because we know they're ready to go bigger scale. So we make sure they're part of that process with us early on.
Okay. And what is the process like with regards regulation?
Well, we have three different things, right? Topical pain relievers are regulated by the FDA as an OTC drug. So there's certain things we have to do there and claims we can make. We can relieve arthritis pain, back pain, muscle and joint pain, sprains, strains, and bruises. But we can't tell you that turmeric is an anti-inflammatory or supports inflammation. On the flip side, we have a curcumin supplement based on turmeric that we can say, because it's part of a different segment of the market in the supplement side that's got a little more gray area. We're super careful about what we say, but we can say it supports a healthy inflammatory response. It doesn't reduce inflammation, right? Now, people have seen the studies that shows curcumin has done that, but we don't say that. We can't say that. We say it supports a healthy inflammatory response because that doesn't treat, cure, or diagnose a disease. Then on the testing side, there's certain things we have to do to have our lab approved from a quality standpoint, CLIA approval and things like that, and having certain regulations, and we get checked out by the different. So that's a whole different game. And need to make sure that the results that we're getting and sending to people are accurate and repeatable. And so that opens up a different realm. So to be honest with you, it's the biggest challenge we have is that we have these three segments that have different regulation, but we always try to be as careful as we can be and don't try to make claims that we're not allowed to.
For sure. Just on that regulatory piece, is that something that you're paying for kind of more in terms of time, or is it capital intensive?
It's capital intensive up front,
Okay.
but then it's a maintenance cost of mostly time, and then maybe a little bit of capital if you have to make some changes to the systems and whatnot that you're doing.
Okay. And then another point that I kind of picked up on when we spoke before was about, price sensitivity in retail. I think when you were kind of initially launching, you didn't think that would be kind of an issue, but it is, right?
Well, at retail, oh my goodness, it's a different beast. I mean, we got into retail, Target and CVS, I think it was back in 2019. Took us a year to get on the shelf. You pay all these slotting fees. We celebrated. We're like, we made it. We made it. We're on the shelf with Iceon, BioFreeze, and all this. And it was the worst thing we ever did for a couple reasons. We had our product in a very big tube at a high price point. When you're online, it makes sense. It makes sense for shipping. It makes sense for all the sort of things that e-commerce needs to, because we could tell our story to the consumer to justify the price point and the size. And to be honest, it wasn't that expensive. You were getting a lot of product for a higher price point than you'd get in the store. In the store, most topical pain relievers are priced between $8 and $15. So you get on the store, and by the way, some of those at $8 are in a jar that's the size of a penny. So they're like cost per ounce 3 times more than us, but the consumer doesn't see that oftentimes. They just see the overall price. So we should have done a smaller tube at a lower price point. We've since fixed that, but we're no longer in retail because there's other issues. The other issue was you need a huge marketing budget to drive boots on the ground into retail to buy your product. They're not just going to browse the shelf. We saw customers engage with our shelf with 30 products on it, and ours was beautiful. It literally, in my opinion, I'm biased, but it's the best looking packaging on the shelf. Soft touch with gloss accents, with beautiful colors, with plants on it. And the consumer would just look at the price and they'd say it out loud. So, and we did, it's not like we didn't sell any product. We did. We did sell some and we did pretty good, but we pulled out for another reason because the week we got on shelf after years in the making, COVID shut the world down. So we had no marketing budget telling people about the product in the store. And then what consumers are going in browsing for new products during the first year of COVID? Nobody. So it was a triple mistake. And we learned a ton. Inevitably, we will go to retail, but we're just going to focus on what works. We're profitable online. We don't need to win those different games. We can tell our story. We can bundle and educate with the other products we have, which we believe is so much more important than just selling a topical pain reliever, is educating on the testing and the supplements that can really help people fight pain with wellness. And so we're focused there, and we know that we can take the lessons we've learned and succeed at retail in the future.
Okay. And in terms of, succeeding at retail in the future, is that, when people are almost demanding that from the retailers, demanding your product?
That's the ultimate. We get so big that the not even people, yes, but really the retailers are demanding it from us because the people are demanding it from them. And we get to that point, and there could be very exciting things happening for the brand. But if you don't get to that point and you try to force it into retail and succeed there, I have many friends in this industry who've failed and gone out of business because of the cost and the cash flow issues that come with retail. So you have to really be ready, not think that you're ready. You got to know that you're ready. Um, and we believe we understand what will tell us that, but we're also focused on what's working right now, which is the things that we're doing,
Okay.
the channels that we have today, direct to consumer. Some practitioners we sell really well through, specialists, chiropractors, these stretch labs that are popping up everywhere with like proactive stretching. That's amazing. Doctors and they have credibility and they love our product because it helps their patients. And so those are really great channels for us, more so than retail would be right now.
Okay. Final retail question, I promise, is I think you said BioFreeze was a business that you thought had the right playbook for retail. Outside of what you've kind of already covered, what do you think they're doing that's, really good?
Well, they did a great job of building their market in that chiropractor clinician channel I talked about. They spent decades doing it. In fact, they told the clinicians they would only sell to them. And so a lot of clinicians would push the product because you couldn't get it anywhere else. But they got the opportunity to go into retail. I forget what year it was, might have been 2018. And they blew up because they were able to market as the number one clinically recommended topical. They leveraged the success of a lot of consumers seeing it in that space. And then they got their price down. So they were now undercutting where they would sell at the clinician channel, and they went into retail and they blew up. I forget the exact numbers. We went to like 8 million, 27 million, 91 million in retail in 3 years. And they ended up selling to a big conglomerate, Reckitt, for 1.2 billion, I believe. Something like that. Multiple, over $1 billion. And they didn't sell it because of the success they had in the clinical channel. But the clinical channel is the reason they had success in retail. Right? The timing was right. They got big enough that they realized the big mass opportunity is at retail based on the success we had. And after just a couple years of success in retail, they got a huge exit, which was pretty exciting. So for us, we'd love to follow in their footsteps, but we're different. We're similar but different. Where you have a topical pain reliever that we believe can compete with them for the right demographic of customers, but our broader brand is much different than anything else any topical brand on the market's doing today.
Okay. So just to clarify, you're saying kind of what they did well was building that pent up demand almost before they went into.
Pent up demand, I think the biggest thing is the credibility.
Okay.
In our space, credibility is key. Credibility is key more than price. Price is important when you just sit on the shelf, but if you had the pharmacist at the front of the store saying you should try the Feel Good Lab product if it was double the price, you'd still do it. So credibility, and they did that. They built up credibility and demand through their initial channels.
So yeah, so just to clarify, that's what you're saying. So those initial channels of physicians, etc., that they kind of went through, that built them the credibility.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay. Cool. Something I want to touch on next is what you said earlier today about, yeah, kind of not just wanting to be like a product company. You also want to become like a knowledge hub. Can you just kind of explain that, what you mean there?
Yeah. So I don't think that products are the key to us being healthy. The testing might always be there because we treat individuals, but in a perfect world, like if we really need to think about how we fix our healthcare model, it's not giving everybody vitamin D supplements and this and that. That's going to help. The reality is, how do we get the nutrients back in our food? How do we start eating as young kids the right balance of food so we get a healthy microbiome and we eat to fuel our bodies and not to, to eat like it's a drug because it tastes really good, which is what most people do today. So that's the direction. And so I'm thinking 30 years out. And if we get into a world where we have that, then we just need to educate because we get the nutrients that we need, we get the minerals in our water, we get the things that we need from life itself, which is probably how things were 1,000 years ago, right? So I don't think that supplements and topical pain creams are the solution long term. My real vision is that education and good choices are the solution. And then if you need those products, great. I don't see them going away. You might sprain your ankle and you might get, but I hope that chronic pain starts to go away. I hope that some of these chronic conditions that would make you take a supplement forever. It's like the opposite of what I talked about with the fiduciary responsibility of pharma. A good business decision would be for us to say, "Hey, take vitamin D forever. You can never get it from any other form." The truth is, vitamin D is the only vitamin that our body produces, and it comes from the sun. So, how do we learn to optimize the sun we get with the other things that we need in our body to produce the right amount of vitamin D where we don't need to take supplements, right?
Okay, so it's kind of educating people so that they make changes in their life and then also demand change in their community. Is that fair?
Right. But this is the long, long, long term vision. And I know it's going to be a long road to get there. And, I don't see in the next 10 years getting there. But again, it's what we're shooting for.
Okay. And what does that vision look like in kind of a practical sense in terms of pushing out media for the Feel Good Lab?
The thing that I love the most is this the conversation we just had. A big goal for me this year is to get on as many podcasts as I can. And what's cool about what we do, this is a business podcast, right? Email marketing and all those sorts of things, but we barely touched on that because the things that we do are interesting to almost everybody. Almost everybody could benefit from these. And so it's not like we have a really, really tight niche of people with autoimmune disorders and just go on autoimmune podcasts. I believe that any podcast that has an active listening base that's interested in improving their health and wellness, we could be beneficial and helpful to. And so that's my goal is to kind of spread the word that way. And again, it's through credibility. So you have an audience that knows, likes, and trusts you, and you vetted me. We had a great conversation. And so it's finding people like yourself that believe in our mission, and we can have a great conversation to tell more people about it.
For sure. And I've got to say, that's been, yeah, my favorite chat, just not from a kind of work perspective, but just like I'm genuinely interested in this stuff. The guys at my team are also interested and they kind of asked a lot of these questions through me as well. So, yeah, for sure. I think it's a
Cool.
very interesting topic. And yeah, I want to kind of round off there. So, Ryan, thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed the conversation. Two final questions. Firstly, is in terms of kind of people following along, where is the best place to do that? Where are you active, and yeah, where can people find you?
We are not doing a great job on social media. And the reason is when we started, the demographic just wasn't there. We're moving in the direction, especially with the launch of this new test over the weekend. So we're going to start doing a lot more proactively on social media and educating. So go ahead and follow us on, Instagram, on Twitter or X, and we'd love to see you there. But you're going to see a big changes from that perspective. The best place is send me an email, Ryan at thefeelgoodlab.com. I love to connect and educate and help and work with people. If you have questions, advice, just want to chat, shoot me a note and follow along. Our website is the best place to interact with us. I have a live chat, it actually comes right to my cell phone. So, those are the best ways today, but you're going to see some changes over the next year in terms of the education that we do. Today, we do a pretty good job educating over email, and we're going to start moving that into more social media, Instagram, TikTok, etc.
For sure. And you mentioned a podcast.
Yeah, we have the Feel Good Lab podcast. We're going into season 3 right now. We just wrapped up season 2. And we like to, our goal there, and you did a good job of this, we like to really get people actionable tips that they can do and not talking the high level and biochemistry and this of like, what can I do right now to be a little bit healthier? And so that's the goal of our podcast. We bring on professional athletes to doctors and my dad and, just people that are on this same journey and mission as us that we can learn from.
Perfect. I appreciate that. Ryan, thanks again. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on today.
Likewise.
Thank you. Scaling an ecom brand is hard. That's why we're on a mission to share as much info as we can to help make it easy. From weekly interviews with the biggest names in the space, to case studies, brand breakdowns, and tips and tricks, and much, much more. Subscribe so you don't miss out.